Everything you need to know about the Vigo Dem Party. So sit back, relax, and watch from anywhere. Get ready for a chat with a chair.
So we have asked Councilperson Wager to address us regarding Don Pruett, and Vicki has known Don for virtually his entire life and has prepared some words regarding his service with the Terre Haute Fire Department and his service with the Harrison Township Assessor's Office. So Vicki Wager, Councilperson Vicki Wager.
We have a musician here from Chicago, and he got lost in West Terre Haute. That's not easy. Since our friend Don Pruett slipped away from us on February the 3rd, I've given a lot of thought about his life. I've known Donnie and Jill almost 50 years. We were part of the social media campaign of 1975. Oh yeah, we had social media in 75. That was a big political campaign when Mayor Bill Brighton ran for re-election. And George Schofstall ran against him in the primary election. We knew we had to fire up a big, strong campaign. And in those days, there wasn't any such thing as the internet. No social media as we know it today, but there was a very special social media that nobody could outwork or outsmart. And that was the mighty marching Pruetts. If you had the Pruetts on your side, nobody could beat you. And Brighton had the Pruetts. Starting on the first Saturday morning of April at 9 o'clock sharp, the troops would start rolling into the City Hall parking lot. More than 100 men, women, and children laughing and singing and frolicking, raring to go, carrying the message of a new day in the city. No more gambling, no more prostitution, but new jobs and a new way of doing things. And these frolicking folks would head out into the precincts armed with doorknob hangers and put their material on every door in the city on Saturday morning. And the next Saturday they would assemble again and they'd head out with another piece of literature, telling folks about the paving project coming to their neighborhood. And the next week a piece would tell them about a leaf pickup on the street sweeping program. And nobody was as efficient or fun and dependable as the mighty marching Pruetts. They were the original social media stars. And in this biggest and best group, there was Don. That was Donnie's dad. Then there was Donnie. That was our Donnie. And then there was little Donnie. They liked that name. And he was in a backpack on Jill's back. And then there was Jill, or there was Uncle Jack. And these were the firefighting Pruetts. They were tough as nails, but they were also as gentle as the breeze, wonderful and smart. But don't mess around with them. They got the job done. Donnie wasn't yet a firefighter because he wasn't old enough. But as soon as the campaign was over, he turned 21 and he got elected to be a firefighter. It was a family tradition. That was Donnie's way. He was a good human being. I never really heard anybody say a bad word about him, ever. I believe he was a true public servant. He wanted to be sure people were treated with respect and kindness. When I was in the county annex and I had a little extra time between meetings, I would slide down to the south end of the building and make my way into his office. And the minute somebody came up to the window, he'd be sure they were helped immediately. He was the definition of kindness. Donnie and I both loved IndyCar racing. We would spend a little time talking about A.J. Foyt or some obscure driver like Don Branson, or even talk about the mechanics like A.J. Watson. Donnie was a bona fide fan. He knew the underpinnings of IndyCar racing, and he had assembled a collection the likes of which you would not believe. 2 rooms full of the most beautiful collection in the world. Jill gave him the gift of a lifetime, a ride around the Indy track at 200 miles an hour. Donnie might have been an IndyCar driver if things had been just a little bit different, but thankfully for us, he ended up on our track. Donnie adored his family. He loved to take his boys fishing, and he would tell me stories of fishing with little Donnie and Mark when they were small. And he would chuckle, and it was so sweet. And then he would tell me, hey, I took Jill out last night. And then he'd say, we went to Walmart. He's a big spender. He'd say he loved Jill. He said, she's such a sweet girl. That was 50 years after he met her. And if you know Jill, you know why he loved her so much. We think of Don Pruett as soft and sweet and kind-hearted, and he was. But let me leave you with this thought. Don was a professional firefighter. He spent his life helping us, serving us, and for half of his life, protecting us while we slept, while our children slept, while we worked, while our children played. He was on duty. He was a brave heart, willing to rush into the flames to save us, to save any life at the risk of his own life. He was not of great stature, but he was of great character. And he was of great strength, strong enough to hoist you onto his shoulder and carry you from the flames. For a quarter of a century, this was his charge. We could not know bravery greater than this. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have some music from Michael Reed.
We are very blessed in this community to have someone as accomplished and intelligent as Dr. Crystal Reynolds. Crystal Michael Reynolds, I believe, is the correct introduction, but she is, of course, been a tremendous asset to our community. We're very fortunate to have her a member of our party. She's also a very integral part of the League of Women Voters. She has spoken extensively, particularly over the course of the last month, with regard to Black history, and she has been very gracious to agree to come this evening to our Democrat event to make a presentation. And I know again how busy she is, so I appreciate her taking time out. And I would ask that we give her a warm welcome, this Dr. Crystal Michael Reynolds.
Okay, normally I do 2 hours for this, hour and a half, but this is going to be 15 minutes. And I wanted to talk to you guys about a Terre Haute hometown hero or heroine. Have you guys heard of Willa Brown? Good. Now, can you hear me? I have 2 masks on. Okay, all right.
Can't hear her?
No, you can't hear? Okay, I'll take one of them off.
Please.
Who
We
said
won't
please?
breathe.
Who
We
said please like
Can you hear
that?
that? Can you hear it?
Can you hear with this one on?
It's better.
Okay, all right, because I normally wear 3 masks, but right now I'll wear 2. Okay, so let's do the first one, the big one first. Sorry. Okay. So that's Willa Brown. Now, I got interested in Willa Brown because I read something about her, and it mentioned Terre Haute. And I said, wait a minute, this is a Terre Haute person? But when you go on the internet, or you go in any sources, it rarely mentions Terre Haute. If it mentions it briefly, and it misspells Terre Haute. It spells it with an A, Terre Haute. So I started studying her, and you're going to have to stay up there for a few minutes, okay? Is that all right? Can you handle that, Joe? And I discovered amazing things about her. And then I'll tell you at the end the initiative that I've done in terms of Willa Brown that you guys are going to be a part of. So Willa Brown, Willa Beatrice Brown, has many, many firsts. And one of the first is that she's the first African-American woman to earn an airplane mechanics license or aircraft mechanics license, which she got in 1935. Now let me tell you a little bit about her first. So Willa Beatrice Brown was born in Glasgow, Kentucky. About 3,000 people. Today it's about 14,000 people. And my research has shown she went to Sarah Scott. Her family moved from Glasgow to Indianapolis, came to Terre Haute. And the reason they came to Terre Haute, why do you think her family in the teens came to Terre Haute of all places from Kentucky? Jobs? It was actually schools. Terre Haute Junior High and Terre Haute High schools were desegregated. And when she came here, it was 1918. The schools were desegregated in Terre Haute in 1918. Not the elementary schools, but the junior high and the high schools. So they wanted their children to have a good education and to be with a variety of people. So they came to Terre Haute for the schools. You're doing a good job, by the way.
Thank you.
What about me? Oh, you too.
Thank you.
And my research says she went to Sarah Scott. I haven't found any pictures yet, but I'm still trying to find her in one of the yearbooks. She graduated, then she went to Wiley High School. You guys are familiar with Wiley, right? Yeah, Wiley High School, and she graduated in 1923. And she was a stellar student, an amazing student. And then after she graduated from Wiley, she went on to Indiana State Normal School, which of course we know now as Indiana State University. And what a lot of people don't know is that Indiana State University, and I talk about this all the time, was in the business of educating everybody from day one. The school was founded in 1865, but the first class was 1870. And in the very first class, there were 3 African Americans, and they were from Lost Creek. So from the very beginning, in the business of educating everybody, almost unheard of in this country. It took 100 years later, 1965, in the 1960s, before schools like, and if you're Ole Miss fans, sorry, but Ole Miss, Alabama, and many of the deep South schools did not allow African Americans in for 100 years later. And it took military troops to get them in. So we were 100 years ahead of the game, Terre Haute was. Can you believe that? Yeah. And she majored in business. She graduated in 1927, and she is in the Indiana State University 1927 yearbook that I own. Okay, thank you, Joe. Joe, you're missing talent. You could be like Vanna White or something. Okay, that's the last one. Okay, this one. Okay, so upon graduating from Indiana State Normal School, she went to Gary Roosevelt, taught, and she had the best education because Indiana State Normal School was a premier teachers college at the time. So she was well prepared, went there, taught in Gary, Indiana. Then she moved to Chicago. In Chicago, this is during the Depression, she was working in Walgreens, and she met these men who kept coming in, and they were pilots, African-American pilots, white pilots, they were coming in. And she had always dreamed of flying. She had actually seen Bessie Coleman. Are you guys familiar with Bessie Coleman? She's an African-American woman pilot in the 1920s. She didn't get her license here. She had to go to France because black women couldn't get their license here in the 20s. She went to France, and she was, she was a rock star. And she had seen her fly in Indianapolis and had always wanted to fly. But 1920s America, women didn't fly, let alone black women. Now we know there was one famous European American, a white woman flyer. Who was that? Yeah, and that was a novelty. Women did not fly planes in this time, especially black women and black men. So anyway, so she wanted to fly, so she asked she said, I want to fly. She asked the black men who were taking classes at this Harlem Field in Chicago. This was 1930s. And they said, no, women don't fly. We're not going to teach you to fly. I don't know if they said it that way or not, but it would have been similar to that. And so the white men came in, and she said, I want to learn how to fly. I'm this little lady from Terre Haute, Indiana, and she probably did say that, and I want to learn how to fly. And the white men said, we'll teach you. And so then the black men said, wait a minute, we'll teach you. Okay, I'm not even going there. I'm not even touching that. But so she took class, started taking classes, and with the black men at the school that was segregated. So they started teaching her, but she also enrolled to becoming a mechanic. She got a mechanic's license in 1935, becoming the first black woman in the country to be a mechanic for an airplane. Then she was just an amazing student, and she kept going and kept going. And so by 1938, she got her license, a pilot's license. So in 1938, she became the first African-American woman to get a pilot's license. And she was the star student. And so this particular article here talks about her, how she got her license and how well she did. So it says, the first and only colored aviatrix with a pilot's license is Miss Willa Brown. And at least 35 air hours were necessary. She got 100. And it says, and then I'll put this up here so you guys can see it. It says, Miss Brown had close to 100 air hours and received a grade of 96, the highest mark in the class of 15. The other 14 applicants were white men. And it said, congratulations to this aviatrix. So anyway, this was out of the 1938 newspaper, and I have it, so I'll leave it up here. So that was, it made news, international news. Little lady from Terre Haute, amazing, she was brilliant. Anyway, and then she didn't rest on her laurels. I like that word, laurels. She didn't rest on her laurels. She decided she was going to get a commercial pilot's license. Now, I don't know if you guys know about the difference between pilot's license and commercial. I didn't either until I started studying this. But she would be able to take people up with her with a commercial pilot's license and earn money. And this was during the end of the Depression, and she needed money. So in order to earn money, she got her commercial pilot's license, and she started taking people up, a variety of different people, and she could earn money. And that was 1939. And in the meantime, she would fly into Terre Haute, and I had a nice picture, but it didn't print out well. She would fly into Terre Haute. Do you guys know where the airport used to be in Terre Haute? Yes, where South High School is now. She would fly into South High School and pick up her mom in the plane, and then she would fly to Indianapolis and fly all over. And I had a nice picture, but like I said, it didn't print out. So she was amazing. And then the newspapers would report that, Willa Brown came into Terre Haute, and it was just amazing that this African-American woman in the 1930s was this amazing pilot. And like I said, she was from Terre Haute. She grew up on the south side of Terre Haute. They called it Little Baghdad. Have you guys heard that term? Oh, yeah. They used to call the area by Booker T. Washington Center in that area Little Baghdad because there were a lot of people of color who lived there. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Okay, so then she decided, you know what? I have my pilot's license. How am I doing on time? She said, I have my pilot's license, and I could stop there, but why don't I work to make sure other people have it as well? So her husband, the gentleman who had taught her Cornelius Coffee, they got married. Love was in the air. They got married, opened up a school called the Coffee Aeronautics School, and they decided to offer lessons. And something that was extremely unique and something amazing, it was open to everybody. Whites, blacks, Hispanics, etc., men and women. So she opened up a school and started teaching, and the school was really popular, and it was in Chicago. And then she said, you know what? I'm going to start teaching I want to teach African-American men how to fly, and then maybe they'll learn how to fly in the military, because by this time we were entering the World War II, maybe the military will let black men fly. Because in 1930s, the military was segregated. Do you guys know when we desegregated the military? It was actually 1948, and it was an executive order, Truman. So she basically said, you're doing good, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. So she said, let's try to desegregate the military, but also let's teach black men how to fly, because there were no black men aviators in the military. There was no Air Force, it was called Army Air Corps. So she personally trained she trained several, but 200 African-American men in this program called the Civilian Air Training Program. And she trained them, and then they went off to a place in Alabama called Tuskegee. You guys have heard of Tuskegee, right? So this was a special program at Tuskegee. She trained them at her coffee school. Then they went to Tuskegee as part of a military program, and we know them as the Tuskegee Airmen. So let me tell you a little bit about that though. So the military didn't want to train African American men. They went basically kicking and screaming. She lobbied. She went to Washington, D.C. She wrote letters. I have a letter she wrote to Eleanor Roosevelt, an actual letter, where she said we need to desegregate the military, but we need to train black men to be pilots. So that's what she did. And the people around her said, no, we're not going to go to Washington. They're not going to listen to us. She said, oh, heck no, I'm going to Washington. So she flew her plane to Washington. She wrote letters, and she's the one who basically helped to desegregate the military, but in the process to get the Tuskegee Airmen to train them as part of this program. So 200 of the Tuskegee Airmen out of 900, she personally hand-trained. You can put that down. I think it's that one. And to thank her, now most of the Tuskegee Airmen are now deceased, but today they do a flyover of her grave. And the association, the Tuskegee Airmen Association, they do a flyover of her grave, and they toss flowers. Now she did one of Bessie Coleman, and now they do one of her and Bessie Coleman, and that's just a flyer, like a poster of the flyover. I have been invited to the flyover in Chicago this year, and the Tuskegee Airmen, and they document it, and they write about how she trained them. Because her school in Chicago was the feeder school for Tuskegee. So her school was like the bachelor's degree, and then Tuskegee was like the master's degree. And she was just amazing pilot, brilliant, and they credit her. Now, have you guys seen the Tuskegee Airmen movie or the Red Tails movie? Have you seen the part about Willa Brown in there? No, because it's not in there.
Quick question.
What?
Quick question.
What?
The trick question.
What?
It was a trick.
Trick question.
Oh, it was a trick. He said trick question. Well, you would know, Mr. Lawyer. But that didn't come out right. Y'all know what I meant by that. You know what I meant. You know, it's all love here, all love. Okay, so anyway, so then, no, because she's not in there. So you watch the movie, and you would think all these men went to Washington, and they're the reason that the Tuskegee Airmen were able to be trained, and the military was able to be desegregated, which the men had something to do with, don't get me wrong. But Willa Brown, she's the person who lobbied and who trained them. So this woman who grew up on the south side of Terre Haute personally trained, and it says 200, but it was more, 200 Tuskegee Airmen who later went to war and helped save the world from Hitler. But in the meantime, she was also, can I have the other one? In the Civilian Air Patrol, which was the division that protected the homeland. She became the first black woman to become an officer. They made her an officer. She was just that good. She was, little kids, close your ears. She was a badass. And she was so good. They put her in charge of the Civilian Air Patrol in Chicago, and she was the first first black officer there, and then she was the first black woman officer in the Civilian Air Patrol in the United States, and she was a lieutenant. And to honor her, so all of a sudden, this last 2015, the Congress said, you know what? The Civilian Air Patrol basically saved the homeland, and they had all kinds of missions, and they helped protect us. We're going to honor them. So they honored the people who were part of the Civilian Air Patrol in 2015, and she was one of the people, they tried to track them down, but she was one of the ones honored. And can you hold these? And if you look at the pictures, she's no longer with us. She died in 1992. But if you look at the picture, that's she got the Congressional Medal of Honor in 2015, and look who gave it to her family. You know who that woman is in the middle?
Yes, Pelosi.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi presented her nieces, because Willa did not have any children. But they looked just like her. Presented her children, her nieces rather, with a Congressional Medal of Honor, because she was honored in 2015. Yeah, and anyway, and I'm friends with her nieces, and they said it was an amazing experience. So they finally acknowledged her in that instance. Okay, so I know. Told you it was a 2-hour presentation. So, But I got to get to the last part. Okay, can you move your hand? Thank you, Joe. And he actually listens to me. That's a good, Joe Etling listens to me. That's a good thing. All right. First African-American woman to run for U.S. Congress. First African-American woman to run for U.S. Congress. 1946, 1948, 1950. Nobody knew that. Nobody knows that. They think it's Shirley Chisholm. She actually became a congressperson, the first black woman congressperson, but she ran, Willa didn't win, but she ran for Congress. 46, 48, and 1950. And she took on a person who was the prodigy of Mayor Daley in Chicago. And she took on his prodigy, the person he mentored. She took on the Democratic establishment. But guess what? She wasn't a Democrat. Sorry. She was a Republican. But it was the party of Lincoln. Many African Americans were Republicans, the party of Lincoln, until something happened, and we don't want, that's a whole other story for another day. But anyway, and so she was not successful in terms of winning the primary, but the fact that she decided to take on this machine, and she actually did okay, but she didn't win, but she took on this machine, and she ran for Congress. And that's something that was lost to history. From Terre Haute, ran for Congress. Okay, you can put that down. All right, I'm going to say one more thing about her because, thank you. I am going to say one more thing, and then, because this is important, and then I got to end because it's supposed to be 10 minutes. But, I'm going to say two more things. She was a victim, and this went unreported. It's not anywhere on the website. It's not in any documents about her. There is no actual biography about her, because I think I'm going to write one, though. She never wrote an autobiography, but this went unreported, and I researched this, and I discovered it from her family. She was a victim of McCarthyism. Are you guys familiar with McCarthyism? Yes. 1950s, accused of being a communist. She was on the list. So from 1950, right after she ran for Congress, to 1955, she had to leave and go to France. She lived in France 5 years. She flew. She made money by flying. She learned French. She became proficient in French. But she was very, very sad because her country thought she was a communist. And it was a rough time for her, but France took her in. She came back in 1955, and her family said she was never the same. So every time they went to record her and get her story, she would clam up. She never wanted to be recorded, and she never wanted anybody to hear, have her voice documented. So she didn't write her story, and nobody recorded her story. So her story's not out there. But her family told me, they say, Crystal, we know you're a historian, we know your passion, we know you will try to get to the truth. We want you to start telling her story. So, and that's the true story. So I am trying to tell her story because her story has not been told. Now, one of the ways I'm telling it now, and I try to give presentations. But another way I'm going to tell it is that I went to Tammy Bolin. Where's Tammy? There she is. And I said, Tammy, I want a street named after her. Aren't you a council person? I want a street. Can't you do this? Because I think we need to start talking about who she was, because she's a national treasure, thank you, an international treasure, and she's a Terre Haute treasure. And that's the most important part, Terre Haute treasure. And Tammy's like, well, Crystal, why a street? Nobody's going to know. It's just going to be Brown Street, and nobody's going to really care about the street. Why don't you get a hangar named after her? And I'm thinking, that's a good idea. Thank you, Tammy. And then I said, okay, so Tammy and I went and we met, well, I met with the airport people, and Tammy came with me, and we met with them, and we didn't get the hanger, but we got this huge wall and this huge display, which is an amazing, amazing display. It's like a whole wall with her life and a display that I'm working on putting objects in. And the ribbon cutting is going to be March the 25th, Friday, March the 25th at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to have them email you guys. And we're going to have a ribbon cutting that honors her, a whole wall, and all of her memorabilia, at least some memorabilia that we have. And it's going to be amazing, and you guys are all going to be there, and all of you are going to be there, and her family will be there, and we will once and for all put her in Terre Haute, and we will honor her. And Brigadier General Jeff Hauser, who runs the airport, they just have been so great. And Rick Berger, who is the board president, they've been so great. And they said all these international pilots, when they come in that door, the first thing they'll see is Willa Brown, the first African-American woman to get a pilot's license, who was a terrible... One last thing. Okay, and so, well, she just also got another national honor, Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio. But anyway, so to commemorate her, I say we, but I did it. So we have these buttons, 3 different pictures of her life that commemorates her, and it says, give me a second. No, that's okay. It says, but thank you, celebrating a teacher, an aviatrix, an activist, politician, pioneer, Hoshin. Willa Brown, Terre Haute 2022. So, if you guys come out to the event, March 25th at 2 o'clock, everybody will get their 3 different versions of buttons. But today, I only brought a few because I want to wait. So I'm giving these buttons to my helpers. And I have extras, so now I'm gonna do the honor system, but the Democrats are the ones who are always so honest. So who has a February birthday? Okay, if you have a February birthday, you can have a button, and I'm gonna leave them up here. If you have a February birthday, happy birthday. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to end now because I've taken 12 minutes instead of 10. Give or take 20 minutes. But she's a hometown hero, a national treasure, and I want you guys to know her name, Willa Brown, and come to the ribbon cutting, and I want you to talk about her, and she's extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it up for Dr. Crystal Reynolds. Thank you, Crystal.
We'll leave these up here so people can see.
You can see why it's a 2-hour presentation. We appreciate all that information.
And I was only like a little bit.
And the family is very fortunate.
No.
The family is very fortunate that you are advocating for her. Couldn't ask for a better or more enthusiastic person to be doing that. So thank you again for sharing that with us. Thank you all for being here this evening. I want to conclude this meeting and again, wish everybody a safe ride home and have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. God bless you all.